The early United States, and indeed its success during the Revolution, aren't just the result of domestic factors, but a whole heap of international and very interesting politics. For example, many of the founders, such as Jefferson, followed intellectual currents going on in Italy, such as the works of Cesare Beccaria, who recommended the idea of innocence until proven guilty and the right to bear arms for legal self defense. The support of the revolution by the Spanish and the French is well documented. However, there's a lot of influences that are outside of Europe. For example, one of the first countries to recognize the United States was Morocco in North Africa. There also was Haider Ali, an Indian Muslim who rebelled against the British, and the Americans named a ship after him. Haider Ali left his son, the Tipu Sultan, in a position of power. The Tipu Sultan would later fight the British with some great success, using early rockets, which the British would reverse engineer and make the Congreve rocket, the weapon that was used in the national anthem as the rocket's red glare, reflecting its later use in the War of 1812. Moving back towards the Native Americans, though, the influence of the Iroquois Confederacy on the early U.S. Constitution was acknowledged by Congress repeatedly. The politics of the American Revolution permanently crippled the Iroquois Confederacy. 4 tribes sided with the British and 2 with the colonists. And as a result, this civil war within the Iroquois crippled their power. The reverberations of the American Revolution, both ideological and military, reverberated around the world. Many countries would come to see the American Revolution as a victory against colonialism. Because the US was a republican system when much of Europe was still ruled by absolute monarchs and outright feudalism in some cases, many aspired to emulate it. A famous example being Garibaldi, the man who helped unify Italy. Even American English was seen as a more progressive way to spell things for a time. For example, much of the early English language was copied from French in terms of its spelling. That's why the British International Spelling has center spelled with T-R-E instead of T-E-R. The Australian Labour Party, for instance, spells it using the American spelling instead of the British and Commonwealth spelling, because that was seen as the more progressive solution in the early 20th century, and there still are some place names in Australia that reflect this sentiment. Even Sun Yat-sen, the man who overthrew the last imperial dynasty of China, was inspired by the American Revolution and the U.S. Constitution. The role of the United States in the world may change in the decades to come, but there is a long precedent of influencing the rest of the world directly and indirectly. I would make sure that this continues.